Welcome to my channel of Gil Master Stories. Don't forget to subscribe button and press on the bell icon for more inspiration and mind-blowing stories. They thought he was just another easy target, a quiet man alone in a diner. But when the bikers pushed too far, they learned the hard way. Some battles are over before they begin. The wind had a bite to it that afternoon as Darius pulled his truck into the gravel parking lot of Earl's Diner, a worn-out roadside joint just off Route 66. The kind of place where time seemed to stall, and strangers weren't always welcome. The open sign buzzed dimly against the dusty glass window, flickering with just enough life to signal it was still in business. A lone gas station stood nearby, its pumps rusted and forgotten. Darius cut the engine, took a moment to glance at the diner, then grabbed his wallet and cap. Inside the diner was exactly what he expected. Checkered floors, vinyl booths splitting at the seams, and a jukebox in the corner that hadn't played a song in decades. The smell of burnt coffee and stale grease hung in the air like a bad memory. A waitress with tired eyes wiped down a counter that was already clean, muttering something to the short order cook behind her. Darius walked in, the bell above the door jangling loud enough to turn heads. Heads that lingered. There were no smiles, no polite nods, just stares. The kind of stares you feel before you see them, curious, cautious, and heavy with something unspoken. At a corner table, a group of bikers sat, draped in leather vests and dark sunglasses, despite the dim lighting. Their laughter dropped into silence the moment Darius entered. Unbothered, he adjusted his baseball cap, kept his shoulders relaxed, and headed for a booth near the window. He liked facing exits. Old habits die hard. The waitress approached him, her pen tapping nervously against her notepad. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice flat. "Just a cheeseburger and fries," Darius replied softly, "and a coffee black." The woman scribbled it down without looking at him, her eyes darting toward the bikers, who were now watching Darius like a hawk circling its prey. Darius didn't engage. He just sat calm and still, tracing the rim of his coffee cup, as if the room around him didn't exist. But it did exist, and it was getting louder. One of the bikers, a broad man with a thick beard and knuckles tattooed in black ink, leaned back in his chair, speaking loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Well, would you look at that? Seems we got ourselves a tourist." The others snickered low and guttural. Darius ignored him. Beardman wasn't done. "Hey buddy, you deaf or just rude?" The waitress returned with Darius's coffee, her hand trembling slightly as she placed it on the table. Darius offered her a faint smile and a soft thank you. It wasn't her fight. She didn't need to feel guilty for walking away, and she did just that fast. Darius took a sip of his coffee. He didn't need to look up to know all eyes were on him. Now the room had taken sides without him saying a word. Outside, a truck rumbled past, gravel crunching beneath its tires. Inside, the air thickened like the calm before a storm. The silence wouldn't last much longer, and Darius knew it. The tension in the diner felt like a held breath, a moment stretched to thin. The bikers had stopped pretending, all eyes locked on Darius, waiting for a response he didn't feel the need to give. "Maybe he's just shy," bearded man jeered, his lips twisting into a smug grin. "Or maybe he's lost. Ain't much for his kind out here." That did it. A low, cruel laugh rolled through the group, like a wave hitting rocks. The diner wasn't big, but in moments like this, it felt suffocating. Darius took another slow sip of coffee, unbothered, as though he hadn't heard them. He didn't flinch, didn't twitch. If anything, he looked bored. That silence, his calm, only made them angrier. The scrape of a chair echoed loud as Beardman pushed away from the table. Boots thudded against the floor as he swaggered forward, his presence heavy. The others sat back, eager for a show. The waitress stood behind the counter, frozen, her eyes darting between Darius and the advancing biker. Beardman stopped just beside Darius's booth, close enough that his leather vest reeked of sweat and cheap cigarettes. "Hey, I'm talking to you, boy." The word hit the air like a slap, sharp, cruel, deliberate. Darius didn't move, didn't look up. Instead, he set his coffee down gently on the saucer. "Something I can help you with," he said finally. His voice, even measured the question, wasn't combative. If anything, it was polite, but the way he said it soft, deliberate, stopped the biker for a beat. Beardman narrowed his eyes. "You're sitting where you don't belong. Don't you know how things work around here?" Behind him, the other bikers snickered. One of them, a wiry man with stringy hair, called out, "Show him Travis. Teach him some manners, Travis," a fitting name for a man so eager to prove himself. Darius exhaled quietly, a breath barely noticeable. "But it was there. I'm just here for lunch. That's all." The calm set Travis off. He wanted a reaction, something to justify what came next. He slammed a fist on the table, rattling the salt shaker. "I don't think you heard me." Friend Darius's gaze lifted slowly, locking onto Travis, and in that instant, something shifted. It wasn't aggression in Darius's eyes. It wasn't fear either, no. What Travis saw was stillness. The kind that doesn't break, doesn't move. It unsettled him. Though he didn't show it a beat past. "Back off," Darius said quietly. Not a plea, not a threat, just a fact. Travis snorted, masking his discomfort with bravado. "Or what?" The diner went dead silent again. No one moved, even the cook had stopped flipping burgers. Travis's patience snapped. "You're going to learn some respect today." He reached out to grab Darius by the collar, and Darius's hand moved quick as a snake. He caught Travis's wrist midair, his grip iron tight. The biker froze. Startled. "Don't," Darius said softly, his voice still calm but carrying an edge now. A warning. For a moment, Travis didn't know what to do. The other bikers were watching, goading him silently to act. He yanked his arm free with a jerk, and stumbled back a step, snarling to save face. "Think you're tough, huh?" Travis spat, flexing his hand. "We'll see about that." He turned toward the others. "Get up, boys." Chairs scraped, the air thickened. The rest of the bikers, 5 in total, rose to their feet one by one, smirking as they cracked knuckles and rolled shoulders. Darius stayed seated, watching them. No fear, no anger. Just a calm stillness that seemed impossible. The waitress, trembling, grabbed the phone behind the counter. "Don't," she started, but Travis cut her off with a glare. "Put it down," he barked, and she shrank back helpless. Travis turned back to Darius. "You've got 2 choices, pal. Walk out that door right now, or we take this outside." Darius didn't move, didn't blink. He set his coffee cup down, the sound almost inaudible. "I'd rather finish my lunch," he said simply. Travis grinned like he'd won something. "Fine, we'll do it here." Then the bikers moved in closer, forming a half circle around the booth. They thought they had him trapped, thought the numbers mattered. They were about to find out how wrong they were. The diner had become a stage. Every person an unwilling audience member. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Even the clinking of utensils had stopped. The bikers loomed, their shadows stretching across Darius like threats. Travis, eager to reclaim his pride, cracked his knuckles and smirked. "Last chance, tough guy. Walk out now before we put you down." Darius stared at him, unblinking. There was no shift in his posture, no tensing of muscles. He looked almost bored. And that made Travers furious. "You just don't get it," Travers spat. And without warning, he lunged. The moment moved in slow motion for everyone else, but for Darius it was instinct, like breathing. Darius shifted, not a flinch, not a shuffle, a precise move practiced to perfection. He slid out of the booth in one fluid motion, grabbing Travis's wrist mid-swing. Redirecting his force, the biker stumbled forward. Caught off guard before he could react, Darius twisted Travis's arm behind his back, guiding him straight into the table. A loud thud echoed through the diner as the biker's chest slammed into the laminate surface. One down, the others hesitated. Startled, Darius released Travis, letting him crumble to the floor. Groaning, he turned toward the others, his eyes calm but firm. "You don't want this," he said softly, almost like advice. "But bikers don't back down. Not when there's an audience." The wiry man with stringy hair was next, charging with a yell, fists swinging wild. Darius sidestepped him like water flowing around a rock, then planted an elbow into the man's gut. The biker wheezed, folding over, as Darius used his own momentum to send him sprawling into a chair to down. the remaining 3 bikers moved together. Now realizing this wasn't a bar fight, this was something else. A sharp sense of panic replaced their bravado, but it was too late. The largest of them grabbed for Darius's shoulder, a mistake. Darius turned sharply, trapping the man's arm and dropping him to the floor with a clean sweep of his leg. Before the biker could react, Darius knelt, pressing a knee into his back, and whispered, "Stay down." The man froze, gasping for air, and didn't move. 3 down. Another came at Darius from behind, wielding a chair. The attack was sloppy. Desperate, Darius ducked effortlessly, rising to grab the chair and yank it free from the biker's hands. The man stumbled back off balance, and Darius closed the distance. A controlled shove sent him into a booth, where he collapsed in a heap. For down. The last biker hesitated, eyes wide, hands trembling. He looked around at his friends, bruised, broken, humiliated. Then he looked at Darius, who hadn't even broken a sweat. Darius tilted his head slightly, a silent question. "You're done." The biker swallowed hard, then turned and bolted for the door, the bell above it jangling wildly as he fled into the parking lot. 5 down. The diner went still. Darius exhaled, adjusting his baseball cap as he glanced at the mess. The bikers groaned from the floor, too shocked or winded to get up. Travis, still slumped over the table, looked up with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Darius looked him in the eyes and said softly, "I told you to back off." The silence that followed was deafening. But it wasn't the fight people would remember. It was what came next. The diner sat frozen. Nobody moved. The silence felt heavier than the fight itself. The waitress stood behind the counter, her hand still on the phone she never got the chance to use. The cook peeked through the kitchen window, eyes wide, his spatula hanging uselessly in his hand. Darius straightened up, his breathing steady, his posture relaxed. If you hadn't seen what just happened, you'd think he'd simply finished tying his shoe. Travis groaned as he pushed himself halfway up, his bruised pride far worse than his aching ribs. "What the hell, who are you?" he muttered, his voice a mix of pain and confusion. Darius looked down at him, his face calm, unreadable. He didn't smirk, didn't gloat. "Just a guy getting lunch," he said quietly. Travis glared at him through bloodshot eyes. "You ain't normal. What the hell are you?" Darius looked around the diner. The eyes on him weren't filled with fear, they were filled with awe, respect. People weren't used to seeing someone that calm, that capable. He sighed softly and shook his head. "You don't want to know." The wiry biker, still slumped against a chair, coughed out, "You military or something?" Darius didn't answer. He turned away from them, heading back to his booth. His plate was still there, burger and fries untouched, the coffee cup half full. He picked up a fry and took a bite. As if the last 5 minutes hadn't happened, the waitress finally moved, stepping forward cautiously, her voice shaky. "Sir, are you okay?" Darius looked up and gave her a soft smile. "I'm fine, ma'am." She blinked, stunned by how polite he sounded. After what he'd just done, she glanced at the bikers sprawled across the floor, then back at him. I'll get you a fresh burger." "No need," Darius replied. "This one's just fine." A man sitting at the far booth, someone's grandfather, with a farmer's tan and calloused hands, muttered, "I ain't never seen anything like that before." Darius ignored the whispers spreading through the room. He knew what they were thinking. A calm man in a world full of noise stands out. People remember that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a few bills, placing them neatly under the edge of his plate. Then he rose from the booth, the sound of his boots the only noise in the room. As he walked toward the door, the waitress watched him go. "Wait." She called after him, "Who are you really?" Darius paused with his hand on the door. He glanced back at her and held her gaze for just a second, longer than expected. "Just a guy who knows how to finish his lunch," he said with a faint smile. Then he stepped outside. The bell above the door jingling faintly as it closed behind him. Outside, the gravel crunched under Darius's boots as he made his way back to his truck. The biker, who had fled earlier, stood near his motorcycle, staring at him in shock. He didn't say a word. He just stepped aside as Darius climbed into his truck. The engine roared to life, the sound breaking the stillness. that had gripped the parking lot, Darius put the truck in gear, glanced once in the rearview mirror at the diner and the people still standing inside, watching him leave, then drove off down the empty road. The bikers would recover, bruises would fade, but the lesson would stick. You don't judge a man by how he looks, how he talks, or where he comes from. Sometimes the quiet ones are the ones you should never test. But for the people in that diner, the story wasn't over, it was just beginning. The small diner on Route 66 would never be the same. Word spread quickly, a story like this, one that people would tell their friends, their family, their co-workers. It grew with each retelling. Yeah, I was there. Someone would say the guy barely moved, took those bikers apart like he was tying his shoes, didn't even break a sweat. Another would add he was calm the whole time, like he didn't even see them as a threat. The waitress told her version too, eyes wide as she described the stranger's stillness, his precision. I asked him who he was, she'd say, and you know what he told me? Just a guy getting lunch for the bikers. The lesson was even harder. The bruises would heal, but the humiliation lingered. Travis, the loudest of them all, was the quietest for weeks afterward. Every time someone teased him about the diner, he'd go red in the face and mutter, "Forget about it," but deep down, he wouldn't forget. None of them would. That day shattered their arrogance. It taught them that strength isn't in numbers or in how loud you are. Sometimes it's in knowing you can, but choosing not to until there's no other option. And for Darius, he didn't care about the stories. He didn't want recognition. To him it was simple. You treat people with respect, and you mind your business. And if someone crosses the line, you handle it not with anger, but with control. Somewhere down that lonely stretch of highway, Darius drove on. The miles passed like whispers, the sun dipping low on the horizon. He wasn't thinking about the diner anymore, or the bikers. He thought about his time as a Navy SEAL, the missions no one would ever hear about, the people he protected, even when they didn't know they needed protecting. That's what mattered to him. Not the noise, not the ego, just the job. As he drove, a tune played faintly on the old radio, the kind of song that makes the road feel endless and free. A few miles later, Darius pulled off to another small roadside spot, this time a gas station. He stepped out, stretched his legs, and grabbed a bottle of water from inside the cashier. A teenage kid with headphones dangling around his neck glanced up as Darius approached the counter. "You headed somewhere important?" the kid asked, making conversation. Darius smiled faintly, tossing a few bills on the counter. "Nope, just passing through," the kid nodded, his eyes catching something in Darius's stance. "You military or something?" Darius paused for half a second, then shrugged. "Just a guy getting water." He stepped back outside, water in hand, and climbed into his truck. As he pulled back onto the road, the cashier watched through the window, feeling something he couldn't quite describe. Respect maybe, or curiosity. And like that, Darius was gone. Another town, another stretch of road. He didn't need recognition, didn't want it, but for everyone he left behind, his quiet strength spoke volumes. A reminder that you don't need to shout to be powerful. You don't need to prove yourself to anyone. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who let their actions do the talking. Respect isn't earned through loud words or intimidation. It's earned through control, composure, and quiet strength. The people who seem the calmest are often the ones who fought the hardest battles. Never judge someone by what you think you see. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear this lesson. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us what really matters in life.